We are continuing our study on the Gospel of Matthew. We are now going to move into the text of Matthew itself. And the first major subsection is the foundation of the kingdom. And this centers on chapters 1 to 7. And we begin with the subsection of the first major subsection entitled Fulfillment. Matthew chapter 1 is the genealogy that Matthew provides of Jesus' ancestry, as recorded through his father, Joseph. So looking at Matthew chapter 1 and verse 6, and then we're going to drop down to verse 17. And Jesse begat David the king, and David begat Solomon of her that had been the wife of Uriah. So all the generations from Abraham unto David are 14 generations, and from David unto the carrying away to Babylon, 14 generations, and from the carrying away to Babylon unto the Christ, 14 generations. I have no proof for this, but I tend to believe that the advent of the internet has been a boon to those that like to study their family genealogy. The internet allows for access for information that for many of us would be out of reach. I have on one side of my family a branch that has its roots in the province of Quebec and a region within that province called the Eastern Townships. In the 19th century, it was an area that was open up to English settlers. So my family background is English. A cemetery that is in that area has records online. So I can go back into that site and find out information that would not be accessible to me necessarily otherwise. Family that is both distant and remote time-wise, geographically, and relationally. When family history is done, what happens? Family history tends to be selective. We can illustrate the problem mathematically. I have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, and then go back, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 1024. In other words, if you go back enough generations, the family tree can become quite unwieldy. So often people get selective of what branch they pick to highlight. In my family history, I might have a grandparent who had a grandparent that was born in the state of Maine. No record here. How she ended up in Quebec, but she did. Now, if you look at her family history in Maine, there is a reason to believe that her family was originally from Massachusetts. And that branch of the family arrived in Massachusetts in the 17th century. This is a whole branch of the family that I knew nothing of. Is it more important or is it less important? The issue here is not to bore you about my family history, but provide a context to read Matthew chapter 1. A family tree, past or present, by necessity must be limited. There is no way we can include all the potential details. We can maybe for 100 years, 200 years. Remember that in the Old Testament era, that they did not have hard drives. The further one goes back, the more one has to make choices. In most family histories, that means the important people get chosen and the horse thieves, or the equivalent, do not. In chapter 1, the key to this genealogy is the great king of Israel, David. We are told here the ancestors of Jesus' earthly father Joseph, but the focus is not on Jesus. You see, the dominating person is David in this genealogy. What we have in this chapter is a riddle. Well, not quite. I say a riddle, for that captures what we are given by Matthew, even though it is not by strict definition a riddle. If you've ever worked with Roman numerals, you will understand when I say here. In the ancient world, numbers were recorded with letters. Apply this truth to this chapter and you unlock what Matthew is doing here. David in ancient Hebrew carries the numerical value of 14. And is this genealogy accurate or exact? The answer is yes and no. It is no in the sense that some of the horse fiefs are excluded. But yes, if you understand that the kingdom of God comes because the King of Kings has come. The King of Kings is he who is a descendant of the greatest Israelite king, David.